Hello, this is Gary Meyer from Arizona State University. This screen capture is for my IFT 101 students. In the screen capture, what I wanted to do is map the Sprinkle book to the Python lab work you'll have to do for Lab 2. One of the things that happens with the Sprinkle book is since it's written from a very general sense, it applies to a lot of different programming languages and not necessarily Python. So what I'm going to do in this particular screen capture is translate the Sprinkle book as to how it would look in Python. Now, one of the big differences here is the Sprinkle book uses the word module throughout the textbook. And module means a little bit something different in Python. When you're talking about a module in Python, you're talking about a Python script or an entire file of source code. What really the Sprinkle book is referring to from a Python standpoint is a Python function, a block of code that serves some particular purpose to the overall program. So what I've done is if you go to page 51 of your textbooks, figure 310, you'll see an example of a rate calculation, very similar to the one I did in the Module 1 example. It's got a little bit of changes here in the logic, but not a lot in the business rules. But again, what I'll do in this particular example is walk you through how I would actually implement this in Python. Now, this is a little bit ahead of what you're going to have to do for an assignment for Lab 2, but hopefully what I can do is kind of map this information from Python to what's covered in Sprinkle. Also, hopefully get some information there too regarding Lab 2. Now, Lab 2 is mostly a typing exercise. Again, you'll follow the instructions to complete your program and then send me a sample of the source code and screenshots, but that's all inside of Lab 2. This is to show you again how the modules work in Sprinkle as they relate to Python. So what I have here in the top is my global variables. Global variables are basically variables which are defined outside of any Python function. And typically global variables will be available for any of the functions to use, with one caveat. Since you can have a variable inside a function with the same name as a global variable, you have to qualify those global variables. So you'll see that in a second. This is a little different than a lot of other programming languages. Most programming languages let you define variables outside of a function to be global, but with Python you also have to register with the function as being global. So you'll see that in just a second here. I have a function for read which maps to the module called read in Sprinkle. I have a function called calc which maps to the Sprinkle module called calc, and I also want one called output which maps to the Sprinkle module called print. Now print is a keyword in Python, so I cannot use it as a function name. I want my function names to be like variables. I want them to describe what that function will do. So I have one function that will read information, one function that will calculate, and one function that will display output. Another difference from modeling languages versus Python or programming languages is it's one thing to actually define your functions, but then they have to be called. So down below here at the very end of the program, I'm going to call the read function, the calc function, and the output function. Now again, using the Sprinkle terminology, this would be the read module, the calc module, and the output module. So essentially what happens here in Python is it reads these variables, sees they're initialized to 0, puts them in memory. It reads the first function, second function, third function, puts those in memory, but does not execute them yet. When I actually call out the function, that's when they're executed. Now later in the class, you'll learn more about what these parentheses do, but for now we're going to just leave that as an open item. So first thing it's going to do is going to run the read function, so it loops to that code. It runs these instructions, then it's going to do the calc, these instructions, and then finally output for this instruction. Now, the one thing that's a little confusing about this versus what's in the Sprinkle text is Python, again, you define global variables outside of the functions, but if you're going to use one of those global variables as part of the function call, calculation, assignment, etc., you're going to have to qualify that with a global keyword. As you can see, the keywords are in purple or lilac here. So global hours and rate is basically saying for this particular function, I'm going to use these global variables. Because if I didn't do that, what would happen is I would declare hours and rate to be local variables, which could only be used by the read function. So when I call the calculate function, rather than have those global variables being updated, they would be unique to this function, therefore be 0. what you can do is I place this code out in the module 2, take out the globals, and you'll see what the outcome is. You're going to give a lot of zeros because, again, because global variables are available to any of the lines of code in your program. They can be retained and changed and added and whatever in the course of the program, whereas local variables are only valid from within the function themselves. Now, this is a little complicated for Module 2 for our second week of class. We'll expand upon this later, but it's important that I show you how we take these models in Sprinkle and implement them in Python. Now, if you have any questions, let me know. This sample code is up there in Module 2. Thank you.